Welcome to the 11th Commandment brought to you by Spook Nation. And I am excited today, Spook, to cover off something new. But before we get into it, tell me something good. How's it going in Tennessee
Man, we're
today?
we're excited because we finally got a few days in a row of 70s and sunshine. So the clover's popping and turkeys are gobbling, and so it's
Love it.
yeah, it's a fun time. Springtime's always just a beautiful time of the year.
It is, and something that you and I were just talking about before we started. So I'm gonna get you as the basketball, lover. And that is maybe a little prediction by the time this airs. And we've got the tournament going on. We were just talking about the Sweet 16 that happened. And I know you're a Tennessee fan. I know you like
Yeah.
the Gators too and the SEC. So give me a little prediction, my friend, of what you think's going to happen.
So I'm a huge SEC supporter, of course, being from the South, and obviously a big Orange fan. I've always liked the Gators in basketball and football. I think that kind of comes from my son Coleman, who was a big Tebow fan back in the day, and
Yep.
then back when Florida won the 2 national championships, we were kind of really rooting for Florida during that time. But Alabama and Auburn have great teams. Alabama shot the lights out yesterday, and
Yeah.
so if they shoot like that the rest of the tournament, they're going to be an extremely difficult out. And then I love Tennessee. They got a good team. They play hard. They're just not as consistent shooting as a team as I would like for them to be. When they shoot good, they win. And it seems like when they struggle as a team rather than one or two players not hitting and one or two players that are shooting well. A
Yeah.
lot of times they're either all shooting good or none of them are. So I hope they
Yeah.
can they play Kentucky today, and I'm hoping that Kentucky's been a tough game for them all season. I think if they can get by Kentucky, they can make it to the Final Four. I've got Tennessee. I did two brackets. I got Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, and Florida making it to the
Okay.
final, an all SEC Final Four. And I got in one bracket, I got Tennessee winning. In another bracket, I got Florida winning.
Okay, okay. Look, I appreciate, my boys follow it and they're knee deep into it in the bracket. And obviously, we're Gator fans and
Yeah.
went to school there and you had the opportunity to watch Tebow play in the national championship
Yeah.
against Oklahoma that year. But
One of my favorite
we've been
people and players of all time.
Oh,
So
he's a
yeah,
good human. I've been around him a few times, and so but look, football's been struggling, and it's nice to see basketball back on track. So hopefully, this is a spark to the program, and we can turn a corner this next year with DJ as well on
for
the football
sure.
field.
Yeah.
Look, Spook, we are going to do something that we've talked about doing, and we're finally getting to it. And I want to read some questions, and we had a gentleman, if you want to give a little bit of background, but this guy is really dedicated into hunting and has come a long way and wanted to take it to the next level. You can see from his background, and we're going to get him some questions, but I know he reached out to you with some really specific
Yeah,
questions
he's
and
been
wanted
watching
some
the
help.
podcast. I really like his attitude. He's been so nice, and he just wants to learn. He wants to learn all he
Yeah,
can. He said, "I want to be able to take my hunting to another level," which
that's exactly
reminds
right.
me of me through the years when I've been inquisitive to other people, and I didn't hold grudges or jealousy or
Mhm.
anything like that. I just wanted to learn. Just
Yeah,
I just wanted to, if I could save a year or two or three or four or five or 10 by somebody else's experience, then that was awesome. And so that's what this guy, his name's
absolutely.
Ty. He said, can I send you some questions? I was like, absolutely. And you can tell he's serious because he sent a
Oh
big
yeah.
list of questions.
I got him right here.
I love it. It was really, really
Yep.
awesome. And so he's been super nice. And I told him we were going to address those on one of the podcasts. So Ty, this one's for you.
Absolutely. No, look, and I can't wait. I'm impressed. A little things that I read here too. I mean, he, in 23, he shot a 150 12 point on land that he bought. And then, the past year, 142 drop time. And just again, trying to take the next level. And he says, my wife is amazing and she understands I caught the bug and I'm obsessed. And all I think about is deer. So, I mean, we can all relate to that,
Yeah.
and God bless his wife for being understanding of this passion and letting him roll with it. So, all right. So let's get into there's just a lot of different
Yeah.
questions. Some
Yeah.
of them we might wait to do a little bit closer to
Mhm.
the season
Mhm.
and rut because he's got some very specific. But the first question is, how do you age a buck? So when you're sitting there, you got obviously, let's take it in two ways,
Mhm.
Spook. You got a game camera picture. So you got a picture and then you got on hoof in the stand. Let's walk through those two scenarios and some of the indicators and things that you look at.
So there's a lot of things that go into this, and it can be, excuse me, it can be difficult because it would be much harder for me to age a Florida deer because I've never deer hunted in Florida.
Yep.
I also find it somewhat difficult to age Canadian deer because they're all so big. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not really talking about a 1 or a 2 year old because
Correct.
those are fairly easy at any level. You can just tell by their faces and their slender bodies, and usually the rack and is mass and those kind of things. But when you get up to 3, 4, and 5 year olds, that's when things get a lot harder.
Absolutely.
And so, but most of us don't hunt in Florida and don't hunt in Canada, so everywhere in between. And when I say Florida, I mean really southern Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia have some of those same, maybe not Georgia so much, but Mississippi and Alabama have smaller deer also, can be a little bit harder. But a lot of times you're just looking at the thickness of the body, the muscles, the size of the neck where it connects onto the body, and then how it runs up in the jawbone and the facial structure where it's wider, and a lot of times just their eyes and their face, they have a different look as far as kind of like some gray and a wider head. I really like on an older deer if they've got that chunk of brisket hanging down,
Yep.
especially if they got that chunky, thick drop down brisket, you can bet that it's usually that doesn't usually start happening until 5 and into 6 years
Right.
old. And so that's a good indicator. But just a lot of times that those shoulders, neck, and the way the neck ties into the shoulders and that brisket is a real good, just that thickness shows
Yeah.
up more. And so many times you can tell also by their mannerisms how they act around other deer, different things. But the number one thing that helps us with aging and really being able to study a deer are trail cameras. And I heard somebody saying they having this discussion. Somebody else was on a podcast about this effort by some game and fish people in different states to outlaw game cameras. They say it's cheating. What? I mean, I just so disagree with that. I think it makes us way better stewards of the herd, way better managers. I think it allows us to, and it adds a lot more fun to it, especially for
Absolutely.
the younger
Yep.
generation when they can, because the younger generation is a more techie generation anyway as a whole. So being able to bring that in and then being able to look at the pictures on the computer and pull it up and see little things here and there that they could
It's
recognize.
a teaching moment.
It's a more of a teaching tool than anything. Yeah, it helps, and it allows us to see what we're dealing with, and
Yep.
and I just can't even comprehend that somebody would tell me I couldn't put up a surveillance camera of any kind on my own property. So
Yeah. No.
I just hope that common sense wins out on that topic, and that never becomes an issue. But trail cameras really help with aging, and it gives you a chance to send that picture to somebody else that's really good at it, which happens. I get 500 pictures a year from guys who want to say, "Well, how old do
That's
you think this deer is?"
yeah. That's such a great point, Spook. I didn't even think of that, of like being able to get other people's take on it. And the other thing I've heard you talk about that I also look at is that sway back and that pop belly. And to your point on seeing the other deer, that's why pictures are great because especially in early season,
Mhm.
you're gonna have bachelor group of bucks, right?
Mhm.
So you get to compare that deer in the body to other deers that are typically gonna have one or two mature
Right.
bucks, then lesser,
Yeah.
lesser, lesser. So that's an opportunity to compare as
Yeah.
well to help you.
And I know a lot of people through the years talk about the sway back and pot belly, but I see a lot of 5 and 6 year olds that have pretty flat backs and
Okay.
pretty normal. I mean, I think it's an look for an overall thickness, just
Okay.
of body size and muscle,
Hindquarters, chest,
hindquarters and
everything.
chest and the whole 9 yards. Because I mean, I don't notice that sway back and belly that much until they're more like 7. And
Really?
how
Okay.
many 7-year-olds do we see in a lifetime?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's not a thing, but to me, that's a little bit more of an older fashioned concept, and maybe even a Canadian concept, or I'm not going to call it a myth because there is some.
No, look, I've seen it in
Yeah,
Georgia, but to your
gotcha.
point,
Yeah,
to your point though, I mean, not every mature buck is going to have that, but I have seen a
yeah,
few
yeah,
in
yeah.
Georgia,
Well,
and to me, that was like, okay, that's a no-brainer.
exactly. So for sure, when you do
Mature,
see it, it's a
yep.
no-brainer that that's an older deer. So that is a
But
good.
it's not the only indicator, is what
Exactly,
you're saying.
exactly.
No, and that's a
And I'm
very
telling
fair
you,
point.
my dad was a good deer hunter and deer hunted his whole life. And to the day he died, he struggled tremendously with figuring out. He just did not. He could not figure it out. You know.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty much now when I see one, I mean, I almost like immediately I say, oh, he's 4. It could be 3, but he's probably 4. I mean, I can usually can tell really quick. But I had a deer this year that I was a little bit stumped on. I even sent a picture of him to Grant to get Grant's input, and he was 5.5. I mean, I thought he was 5.5, and then I'd look at another picture. I was like, dang, he might be 6. And I finally sent. I was like, I'm just going to send it to Grant and see what he thinks. And
Yeah.
Grant thought he was probably 5 also. Of course, Grant will tell
Okay.
you too. He's got a lot. It's got a lot to do with their diet throughout the course of their lifetime.
Absolutely.
If they're
Yeah.
if they're stick eaters, what we call stick eaters, which are a lot of times woods deer here in the South, where they're eating acorns and browse 90% of the time, they're not going to be as big a body. They're not going to look quite the same as a
They don't
deer
have the
that's
crops.
eating corn and beans all the time, you
Yep.
know. And so, or a deer that's on a nice management feeding plan on somebody's property he's been eating protein since he was a year 6 months old. So
Okay.
those are some things that go in. That's one of the first things Grant asked when I sent him that picture, and I said, well, really, the only thing he's got to eat other than acorns and browse is my food plot. I've got a lush food
Okay.
plot, and he's in it all the time, eating clover and
Yeah.
brassicas and stuff. But that's still pretty much kind of considered what we would call a woods deer. Even though
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
he's not growing up on corn and beans.
Correct. Okay, so let me just dig in a little bit
Hmm.
deeper on that,
Hmm.
because obviously for you, you can dial in pretty quick. You've seen thousands of deer.
Hmm.
For somebody that doesn't have that experience, you're in a stand, you got a buck coming. What are 2 or 3 things that your eyes go to help somebody, like, just, you mentioned hindquarters, you mentioned chest. Like, what are 2 or 3 things that within a matter of 20 seconds, 30 seconds, they can visually go to maybe help them?
I think just mass, face, neck, just looking at that, what kind of mass do they have? What's a face look like? Is a nose slender and sleek like a younger deer? Just the first thing you're going to notice is the horns,
Yep.
and so you're going to look, and if he's real spindly and just a lot of times that's the telltale to me. Just those kind of things. I mean, rarely ever are you going to see an older deer that's spindly on mass.
Correct.
They're going to have. I mean, and there again, I'm talking about on average. Okay, yeah, you could have a 2 or 3 year old in Canada that's got decent mass that we would consider pretty good mass here, and then you could have an older deer in Florida that we might consider kind of light on mass, but in Florida he would be considered
He's a
heavy.
big deer.
So I'm kind of
Yep.
like throwing out the extremes of Florida and Canada,
Okay.
and kind of when I say these things, but yeah, I think it's a lot of times just the face and the neck. Yep.
All right. Nope. Fair. All right. Next question. My farm has a ton of does. It's not uncommon to see 30 plus deer a day. Do I need to tag out or leave them? And I think what he's saying is a couple ways you could look at it. Let's just take it from the standpoint of you got a lot of does, way more does, your buck-to-doe ratio is probably off.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
how do you handle that?
yeah. So, I mean, obviously you have to operate within the confines of what the laws are. So according to how generous your bag limits are on does, you know, you need to take as many out as you can, you know, to, and whether it's getting kids in there to shoot some of the does or somebody that needs the meat or whatever. I mean, most of the time, most of our states now have pretty lenient laws on does or quotas on does where you can control the doe herd, and then if you are real serious about it and they're not lenient, then you just got to get, hopefully you can get more people in there to shoot some of them for you. But you know, having a big doe, having 30, 20, even 20, 15 or 20 does to every buck makes it tough hunting the rut. It makes it makes hunting tough, period, because the bucks just got, and so when that happens, you get a lot of those that don't get bred in the beginning, and then they have fawns late in the season the next year, and there's a whole carryover effect year after
Cycle,
year
yeah, that gets
that
thrown off.
affects the herd and throws things off. So you know, you need to try to figure out a way according to what state you live in and what your game laws are and what your quotas are that allows you to try to get those killed down. I tell you another thing too, it's kind of weird. It seems like you would think a big buck would love it, but it seems like your quality in places where you have a poor buck doe ratio is generally not very good either. And
Grant talked about
yeah,
that when we had him on.
yeah,
He
yeah.
talked about that very
You got
point.
too many deer, and
A lot of competition for food.
so they just for some reason I've noticed in places that have a lot of deer, you don't have the kind of bucks that you're really looking for.
Case in point here on our place in Florida. I mean, that's why we're going to have a much more aggressive plan on managing does. And, you know, obviously nutrition and things are a part of what we're dealing with here. But
Yeah.
to that point, when would you suggest harvesting those does? Early in the season? I mean, when you got that many,
Yeah. So,
but what are your
couple
thoughts on that?
things. One, if you've got a big one that you're hunting, obviously you're not going to go start shooting does. If you don't have, especially early season, let's say your season opens in sometime in September. If you don't have a buck that you're really targeting in September and October, that's a great time to kill does.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you're trying to figure it out, you know, trying to figure out or
Haven't been bred
find
either.
another deer, or maybe the property that you've got, maybe you can hunt another property or you can hunt another and then kill does in the meantime and I've always been really fortunate. I've always found buddies that are not as picky as I am. I found a couple buddies through the years, especially here locally and on a couple other places out of state on my on places I had that they just wanted does to eat. Their family wanted
Mhm.
does, and I knew them and trusted them well enough to let them go shoot some does, which helped. But so early, I like early season. If you're not now, if you're hunting a big buck, you're not going to go in there and shoot a bunch of does while you're hunting.
Yeah.
I've also had I had a place one time where it was pretty much an evening place, except during the rut, which most places are. But I had a place on the farm where I could go sit and see 5 to 15 does every morning and not affect the rest of the farm. So I could go there and shoot some does without affecting my bucks or my main part of my hunting, and I could do it in the mornings. So you just have to take each circumstance and pick. Now, after the rut, late season, especially if you've tagged out, you've killed your buck, states where you can kill two, maybe you've killed two, or maybe you only had one target buck and you got him, or he disappeared, or somebody else killed him, or you're not hunting him anymore. I think that's a great time to take them out too. And a lot of times that can be an easier time when they've shrunk down onto a specific food source, you know, a food plot or a cornfield or bean field or whatever. So I just think that you have to figure out how to work it around your goals as for the buck that you're after, you know, and then whatever happens with that, then you work your doe killing around that. I mean,
No,
there's
and I
not a
think
bad time to kill does, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah, yeah.
It's just a matter of how it affects your you're hunting the deer that you're trying to kill, your trophy.
No, absolutely. And I also think, looking at it from a multi-year plan is good, that you don't have to accomplish everything in 1 year, but it's, look, if you can chip away and get, 20-30% killed that year, then the next
You're
year,
not going to fix it in
and
one
then
year.
no,
No,
not
no,
at all. And
it's
that's
a
what I'm saying. Don't
commitment.
feel
It's
like you
several
have
year
to.
commitment, and most of the time, it's a never ending commitment.
Correct. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
for sure.
most of the time, it's a never ending commitment.
Absolutely. So this brings into this next, and we've talked about this, Grant talked about this, but what is your thought? And I know you believe in buck to doe ratio, but what is the importance of having a good buck to doe ratio? And what is that ratio in your mind?
Yeah, so there's several things. Your ideal situation is you've got a great crop of nice genetic 2, 3, and 4 year olds, and maybe a couple 5 and 6 year olds that you'd be hunting that you won't breed in your does. And if you've got a poor buck to doe ratio, you've got everything breeding more does.
Correct.
So yes, that big buck, those your 2 or 3 best genetic bucks are going to get their fair share, but also the bucks that you don't want are going to
Right.
be breeding too. And so that the fewer does that they've got, the less likely that is to happen. And then the rut is completely different when there's a lot of does, because there's so many does, the bucks don't have to move very much to find another one during the rut that's in. And there again, I just don't think that it's a healthy herd when you've got that many more does than you do bucks. As far as, I think you're less likely, like Grant said, and I've always believed this, and I've seen this, the places that I've hunted through the years that had a lot of does, I rarely ever saw a really big buck. Seemed like there was a lot of just, spikes to basket 8 pointers, and the bucks that were there. And that used to be a real problem here in Tennessee, because back in the day, if you saw a buck, you shot him. That's just what, and we had very lenient buck seasons. So we had a buck doe ratio issue. Now not so much. I mean, I probably, if you exclude the fawns out of the equation, which should be close to 50-50 button bucks and doe fawns, I see probably a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 buck doe ratio, which is ideal. And
Which the ideal is
yeah,
one
you
to
want to
one, one to
be, you
two.
would like to be in that 1-to-3, 1-to-2, 1-to-1, ideally 1-to-2, 1-to-1.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Nope.
mean, I think
Okay.
if you get up in that 1-to-5, 1-to-6, 1-to-7, you need to shoot some does.
Nope. Okay. All right. We're gonna turn a little bit. When scouting in June, July, August, do you look for old rubs, scrapes, bedding, and or what are some other things you're looking for that it'll be here, in the next 2 to 3 months? So when you're scouting, what are some of the things you're really looking for?
Well, so I don't think that scouting in June, July, and August is like that good of an idea, period.
Okay.
I think that you need to scout as soon as your season closes, when there's no leaves on the trees, the deer are still running the trails and the bedding areas and the places that they probably were most of the hunting season. You
Got
can
it.
use that as an excuse to shed hunt, scout for turkeys, just get out. The weather's usually way nice, cooler. You're not, there's no ticks, there's no snakes, all those different things.
Sure.
I don't, I
What are
mean,
you looking for when you're doing that, Spook?
yeah, so
What do you look
you're
when you're out
looking,
there?
yeah, so you're looking for trails, and you're looking for those little hidden trails that you may have overlooked in the past. Then you find some, all of a sudden you find a little trail on the side of the hill or around the head of a holler or going off the side of a point or coming into you may find a funnel or something that's got 3 or 4 big rubs and 3 or 4 old scrapes. You're like, oh man, I wish I'd have known about this
Mhm.
during hunting
Yep.
season, and
Yep.
you either document it in some way or make a mental note that you're going to check that out. And you're looking for, maybe, according to how well you know your area, especially if you're in the South or you're in places where there's a lot of hardwoods, which doesn't have to be the South, it can be anywhere. But you're looking for a cluster of white oaks and all of a sudden you see 3 or 4 big rubs and scrapes, old rubs and scrapes around a cluster of white oaks. You're like, oh, if these trees right here have acorns on them this fall,
This is a prime
there's
spot.
been bucks coming into this spot eating acorns.
Yep. Yep.
And then you're just mainly trying to create a roadmap in your mind or document it and mark it on your HuntX app or whatever. And if you start putting all the pieces of the puzzle together with rubs and scrapes and trails in your hunting area, and you document all that, there's going to be some things that are just going to come together for you. And you're going to
Sure.
find where maybe they pinch down into a place where they're all crossing the creek at the same place, or they're all, coming around the side of a ridge at the same place, or there's a place where 2 hollows head up in a narrow saddle and they're crossing, the sides of that saddle, all the just different little,
Sure.
it could be where, a crop field comes in from one way and a crop field comes in another, and there's a drainage ditch comes down, and all of a sudden right in that spot there's 20 rubs and 10 scrapes, 10 old scrapes. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is a lot of those things we see on a topo, but sometimes you don't. There's things, to me, there's nothing like seeing it on foot.
Eye to eye. Yep.
Yeah. And
Yep.
so, so, yeah, I just think that, those are the things you're just looking for, the same things that we talk about from time to time: pinch points, funnels, and
Changes in terrain. Like, I think that's the one when you got one set of terrain, go to the next, go to the next.
yeah. And then you got thickets and where there's cedar thickets and pine thickets and things. And a lot of people don't like cedars and pines. I love cedar thickets and pine thickets because deer love to bed in those. They might not be good places for other things, but deer love to bed in cedar thickets and pine thickets. And so you're looking for, where is that deer going? Where's that buck? There'll always be rubs on cedars and pines. And so that's going to show you a lot of times how he's getting in and out of his bedding area. So if you find a little faint trail on the side of the hill and there's 6 or 8 rubs lead on the cedar trees leading into that pine and cedar thicket, well, that's the trail he's using to get in and out of it.
Yep.
So if you can figure out
Yep.
a way to get right out there on the outside edge of it and get in and get out of the stand without being detected, or figure out what wind you need and a way to access that spot, there's a good place.
Yep. No, absolutely. So this brings up an interesting, you said cedar or pines. So a question is would you rather plant, if he has his own land and has the ability to plant, would you rather plant pines or a cedar thicket? I would suspect that they're talking about from a bedding area.
Yeah, so if I'm trying to create bedding areas, I'm trying to create pockets. I'm gonna plant pines for one reason, probably loblollies because they're the fastest growing, and because cedars are super slow growing. A lot of times, if you're going to go that route, you can just pick an area that you're just going to let grow up, and cedars, almost in a lot of places, especially here in Tennessee, will grow up on their own as fast or faster than they would if you planted them. But pines. Pines are a fast growing tree, and they're cooler. It's cooler for deer to lay under them in the summer, and it's warmer for deer to lay under them in the winter. And especially if you've got snow and ice, they love getting in those kind of places. And I heard some guys on a podcast here lately talking about how they hated cedars and they wish they could get rid of every one of them and blah blah blah. Well, they do suck a lot of moisture out of the ground, and they are demanding as a plant. But I always just look at cedars as great bedding area, and
Absolutely.
that's that's the best thing about them. I mean, yeah, if I'm gonna plant a food plot there, I mean, I'll just take a dozer and build my food plot and get rid of whatever's there, regardless of what it is, and build my food plot. But I like them. I like cedars and pines, and every farm that I've ever helped manage and my own, I've always tried to strategically plant pines. And then what I like to do is come off of the pines to do like a warm season grass and then my food source, because those deer will bed in the pines. They'll stage in the warm season grasses and you can see them, and usually, and then they're going to feed. And so they're more comfortable in that short transition than they would be, otherwise.
Just going from the pines to a food plot.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. Nope. That's great. Thank you. Is there a different terrain or food feature that you look for when hunting early season, during the rut, or late season? So I would say, if I'm trying to interpret this, let's focus on the food. What are the different foods that you might focus on, whether it be a food plot or maybe a natural browse for early season, during the rut, and late season? Let's break it out like that.
So obviously it's all regional decisions. If you've got soybeans and they're green early season, more likely you got deer coming to the soybeans. So obviously you're going to be trying to figure out where you're going to hunt around a soybean field. If you've got nice food plots, clover, alfalfa fields, whatever, and you've got deer coming into those early season, those are great. And when I'm calling early season is before the acorns start dropping. If you're in places where you've got a lot of oaks and you're going to have acorns, that's dictating almost the whole season. The acorn crop, wherever you're at. And now I've got some places that I hunt, and that's why hunting in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas is so much different, because so many times they don't have any acorns, hardly. They don't have many oaks, and most of them are brushy oaks. And if they do have acorns, it changes everything. But early season, usually the acorns aren't dropping yet, so you're looking for that green food source. And so that's mainly what I do. I mean, I hunt, and then as the acorns start dropping, I try to, sometimes I'll pick a day, a warm, sunny day for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the day, and I'll go scout some places where I know there's a lot of oak trees and try to see if I can pinpoint where they're feeding. Usually over the years, especially if it's in a place you've hunted a lot where you live, you kind of already know where those places are at. You figured those out, so you're going to check them out. Like we have an oak here called a chestnut oak in Middle Tennessee. Chestnut oaks are their least preferred acorn, but they drop first. So if you know where there's some chestnut oaks are at, and you go scout those and you see they got acorns, they're going to drop before the others. And a lot of times what I did over the years, I just would find a little grove of chestnut oaks somewhere here, there, just pockets of them. I'd go check them out, of the week or even a few days, or even it could be opening week, because they may not start dropping till opening week. And I'll slide in there, look, and I see, okay, they're falling. I can hear them falling. There's a lot of deer droppings and a rub here. And it's like, okay, they're eating acorns right here. And I'll take my stand and go in there and put my steps up and I'll hunt that spot right there. Most of the time, those acorns are going to, as you know, and I mean, then when your white oaks start falling, that's going to be the preferred. That's their favorite, changer, and they're going to go to the white oaks, and then it's just a matter. I mean, through the years, through my scouting, I found a white oak tree that, for whatever reason, especially big ones, especially if they're in the edge of a field, a yard, in a pasture, those big yard oaks will start dropping sooner. And you've got about 3 to 7 days to hunt that one tree that could be magic.
Got it. Okay.
And I've killed, surprisingly, I mean, it's not surprising when you've done it so long, but you'd be surprised when you figure out where those spots are and watch them. And you can go in August and take binoculars and look and see if they've got acorns. I can't tell you how many times I've driven up in a truck to one and look. Yep, it's got acorns. They're going to be here the second week of bow season. There's going to be a good buck under this tree, because this tree is going to start dropping a week before all the others.
And just put a camera up in there, and then you can see what's going on,
Yeah,
and
back
get a
before the
little
camera
surveillance.
days, I just climb a tree. I knew I
Yeah,
had a red oak tree on one of my properties years ago that start when they were red oaks, and red oaks don't have acorns every year like white oaks can. I'm not saying white oaks do, but they can. Red oaks will be semi-annual most of the time. And I had a big red oak in the edge of a field. It would drop first. When it had acorns, I knew I was going to kill a big deer.
that was it. That was
And
money.
it's like the deer learn too. They learn
Yeah.
as they're growing up where these spots are. So by the time they're 5, 6 years old, they're going to that tree to see if it's got acorns. Yeah. And when it does, I don't even have to put a camera up. I don't have to do nothing. Just climb a tree because there's going to be a good buck there. I had a one red oak tree that I killed 7 Pope and Youngs out from under over a 15-year period.
Nice.
And I had about a week.
Nice.
I had about 4 to 7 days to do it. They were going to be there because it was the first tree every year.
Yeah. I love that's such a good point that I timing it, knowing those particular oak trees and when they're going to do it. That's a good one right there, Spook. Okay. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, what would you do in this situation when he says, when I get busted by a doe, does it matter? And should I go back to that spot?
Oh man, just the curse doe question is, I mean, a lot of times for me, I determine that on what did that happen? Did it happen when I was walking in? Not so big a deal. Also, where do you live? What's it like around where you live? Is there a lot of people? Is it farm ground? Is it real? Is it not? Is it real? I mean, what are the deer's characteristics? Because some farm country deer are more forgiving than deer that don't see people. City deer are very forgiving.
Yes.
So a lot of it's got to do with where you're hunting and how forgiving the deer are. Did the deer bust you going in at 2:00 in the afternoon? And that's not so big a deal. Because it could have been be a doe blowing at a coyote or a million different things. Did she bust you at 30 minutes before dark when you stood up to get ready, thinking you're going to stand up the last 30 minutes of daylight, thinking a buck's going to come in, and she busted you and blew the world up and stands down there and blows at you for 10 minutes before she leaves? I'd probably not go back to that spot for a few days.
Yeah.
So I mean, everything is circumstantial. That's what a lot of people, there's like nothing, just as it is in life, nothing is black and white. It's all circumstantial onto what's going on in your area and when did it happen. If you're climbing down the tree and it's dark and one hears you down there in the woods and she starts blowing, I mean, if the wind's not blowing towards her and she didn't smell you and she's just blowing because she hears you, she didn't see you and she didn't smell you, she doesn't really know what's going on.
Correct.
And then so you got to decide. I mean, I used to have a golden rule that regardless of how good a job I did getting in and out, what seen me, smelt me, what didn't, if everything was perfect, 3 days was the most I was going to hunt anything. Yeah. But that's not a good rule as a general. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that. If you can get in and out undetected, really good. But
I think with the wind too.
Yeah.
I think the wind is, and the one thing I think with that too, Spook, I think deer have personalities too. I think you can have some doe that is just a pain in the butt and she's just going to be blowing it no matter what.
Yeah.
But I also think that wind is a huge part. If the wind shifts and she's blowing because she smells me,
For sure.
and it's blowing where I think he's going to be coming from,
Yep.
high likelihood he's smelling me too, and he may not blow, but he's smelling it. So I've educated him, and that to me is a red flag. Like that one concerns me. The other things, like you said, don't concern me as much.
But remember, you've hunted. Probably you're hunting your spot because the wind is right. this is assuming you've taken a shower, your clothes are clean. You may or may not be using ozonics, but if you've done everything that you can do and the wind is right for your spot, so that your deer are coming from, say, this area in front of you and the wind's hitting you in the face or quartering or whatever, then the odds of that happening, it used to happen a lot more than it does now because we're so much more educated and better at hunting. But that's a lot less likely to happen because you've prepared everything, the way, and more likely if she did get behind you, and she is, and like you said, the wind could shift, and winds do change all the time, and we talk about that. And if that happens and you get blown up like that, especially late, you got to abandon ship for a few days.
Yeah.
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 Now,
but all the other
it's
things,
less, but also it's less of a deal in the rut.
Yeah.
If it's the rut and you really like your spot and you think you're in the right spot, and then it's not as big a deal. It's a bigger
Spook,
deal. It's a bigger deal when you're hunting edges and food sources and food plots, and they start associating a human or scent or sight or sound with that food source. That's when you got a problem. So that's what you have to manage. Thank you. That's what you have to think about. So there again, each situation is dictated by the time of the season, what kind of place are you hunting, and at what time of the day did she blow you up, and all those things have to go into your decision. And sometimes you just go on a feel. Sometimes you just like, I'm not seeing much. I had a doe blow at me yesterday evening. I had a slow evening this evening. I'm not coming back for a few days. But here's the other thing that goes into the equation. You should be making the decision to hunt that spot because the wind's right, the weather's right, and maybe the moon is right. Those are only going to last 2 or 3 days anyways at most. So it's almost always going to warm up. The wind's going to change directions and the moon is going to change. So you've only got 2 or 3 days, more than likely, to hunt that spot anyways. The discussion we're having was something that I used to have I had with myself every day because I thought I had to hunt every day. If I wasn't working or playing ball, I was hunting. Well, I don't do that now. Now I just base my hunting on wind, weather, moon, and trail cameras.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a place more than likely that you're going to go hunt over 2 or 3 days in a row anyways.
Yeah. Great point. Okay. All right. Now let's say you get busted by a buck, by maybe even the buck you're hunting.
So you would say your target buck. Yeah.
Your target buck busts you.
Then you just take a knife and you stick it right here and just go.
Yep. And what a sick feeling, brother. I've had it before.
That's what you do.
You just literally, you want to jump out of the tree, throw up, or like you said, stab yourself.
So there again, you got to evaluate how bad it is.
Yeah.
How bad did he blow you up? Did he blow at you and you turned downwind? He smelt you. And then you turn and looked and he looked up at you and he turned around and bounds off and blows 2 or 3 times and gone. Then to me, you just got to watch trail cameras for a while. Yep. I don't know that I would even go back for at least a week, and maybe not until I got a picture.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I had
all right.
So I got a good story. So whiplash hanging right here behind me. I rattled my first, I believe it was my first encounter with whiplash. I rattled him in. He came into about 70 yards and he made a big circle. and the wind was changing from time to time. We had 2 ozonics, and he walked straight up behind us on the side of the hill. And I felt the wind change. No, I take that back. On this particular time, I didn't feel the wind change. I reached up, and me and JD turned our ozonics the opposite direction.
Yep.
Because I saw what he was doing. And he was far enough away, and there was enough leaves and stuff that we could go real slow. We were hid good in the tree. And we just kept turning the ozonics according to his position. So he gets behind us. He's behind us 100 yards. And I don't even have my bow in my hand at this time. I've just hung it back up, and I'm just watching him with binoculars. Yep. And he stands there, man. He is evaluating the heck out of the situation. I mean, as cool and calm, like a spy. And he knows we got the food just everywhere around us, in front of us. And he heard the rattling coming from that location. Well, he gets up there 70 yards and he can't see nothing. Yep. Well, there's no doubt in my mind, if we'd had a decoy out right then and he could have seen it, he would have come in.
Yeah.
He walks up behind us. So I'm watching him. It was so cool. He's looking, he's kind of looking around. So, you know, if I see him doing this, I'm like, well, he hadn't pinpointed anything, you know.
No.
He did just, it's what he did. Just this speed. Picks his front leg up. Holds it, looks around and goes. Stomps one time. He stands there a minute and he looks around again and he picks his head up. He goes, just this slow. He's looking around. And then turns around and walks up the hill. So he knew something wasn't exactly right, but he couldn't figure out what it was.
Correct.
I could see the confusion in his face. So I didn't bother me. I was like, he don't know what's going on. Maybe he smelled, maybe he got a whiff of something he couldn't figure out, or maybe he got a whiff of the ozonics and couldn't figure it out. But he knew there was no deer down there where the rattling was coming from. So he just didn't come in. I think if there'd have been deer fighting, he'd come in. Or if there'd have been decoy.
No, sure.
But
that's just so that's a mature buck.
That particular time when I felt like, okay, well, we busted a little bit, something. He was seeing something.
Yeah.
So we kept hunting it. I mean, we was back in there the next evening. But yeah, I just think there again, if your target buck busts you, you just gotta back out for a while.
Yep. Well, and then as you just described, there's different levels of bust. There's heads up, something's a little off, not going crazy, and then there's losing their mind, blowing, and you know, getting 3 counties away from you. And
if he blows at you 2 or 3 times, that's terrible.
Yeah,
you know, because bucks don't usually. I mean, my experience has been they don't usually blow unless they're like the bigger, older ones or your target bucks. Or not. They just don't blow unless they're. And I don't think there's any worse sound in the world than hearing a big one blow at your target buck, blow at you. It's just like, because you know you're just toast for a while.
Absolutely.
In that spot.
Correct. And they could show up somewhere else. And that's the great thing is if you can have multiple spots based on wind.
Exactly.
And or multiple properties that you don't just feel your whole life is just sunken away. You can go hunt another deer.
Or you go to another property that day and shoot the next couple of days and shoot a couple of does. I mean, those are the things decisions you make on during the season. Or like if I'm in Tennessee and that happens, okay, well then I'm going to go to Kentucky and hunt a couple of days, or whatever it is. Now I know once again, not everybody has that luxury. They may not have 2 properties or 3 properties or 2 states. Whatever they can hunt in. And they may have 40 acres they're hunting, and this may be their spot. Then you can just take a break.
Yep. Just take a break.
Take a break.
Yep. All right, we're going to hit
wine and dine your wife for a few days.
That's it.
So that you get to go when She don't.
when you need
Yeah,
to,
when you need to. So if you
when
miss
the
a
fire
birthday,
alarm
so if you miss a
calls.
birthday party, you don't have to
Not
do
that
it.
you've ever sounds like you ever had to do that, Spook.
I have been
Somebody,
late for my birthday is Halloween, one of the best
yes, I
days of
know.
the season to hunt. I've missed my birthday party a couple of times. I'm just saying.
Uh-huh. I think we're gonna have a whole segment, and we're gonna have Marty on how to be a good husband and or what an amazing wife is to
So we
somebody that's
need to
got this
have
passion.
we definitely need to have a list of questions, and we need to have just how to manage a marriage through hunting season. I've got some real.
And you know what? You don't get to say a word. You're gonna have to just sit there and just soak it up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's going to be really hard.
Oh, I know it is. That's why I said that. All right, two more questions, my friend. All right, atmospheric pressure, thoughts, and then second is, do you believe in the red moon?
So usually
And maybe atmospheric, maybe it's barometric pressure
yeah.
too. So
So the
let's put both of
barometric
those like a
pressure,
pressure change.
anytime it's changing, it's is a good thing. If it's just steady, more than likely your front has already moved through and everything's kind of stabilized. And I call it kind of a lot of times it just doesn't seem like things are as active. That's why when you've got an approaching front, a lot of times that 10 to 12 hours, especially if it's a big front, a big system of rain, snow, or whatever, they'll move some. You'll have a good push of movement because that barometric pressure is changing. And that's why when the front moves through, it's changing. That's when it's even the best. That's why
So you're saying you got there's the front end and the back end, or you're preferring the back end of
I
the
always prefer the back end, but the front end can be one of the best deer days I ever had was in front of the front. And I'll tell you exactly the set. It was in the afternoon. There were bucks everywhere feeding in October, and there was a huge rain system. It started raining that night, and it rained like 4 or 5 inches in the next 2 days. Just steady, hard rain for 2 days. So they moved hard the few hours the afternoon before it started that night.
okay.
So it's not like it's a 2 or 3 day thing. It's a few hours.
It's it's a window.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then after the front moves through is always good. I mean, when the front passes, now I say always good. The next day, sometimes, especially in the winter, of course, we beg for these kind of days during duck season. It might be 25 or 30 mile an hour wind out of the north. It might not be as good here. It's not going to affect them in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas because they get wind every day, all the time. So it
Yep.
doesn't matter as much in those kind of places. So many things are regionally specific when it comes to different things that we talk about and the way it affects deer. It's like Slim talks about, and it can be that way here some too. You get a big cold front that moves through and it's like 0 in snow. You might not see a deer for a couple of days because they just
I know in Georgia, when it would snow and get cold like that, you'd think you'd need to be out there. And I can tell you, those were the worst days. I never saw a thing.
I know, but that first day the sun comes out and it gets up to 30 degrees, 40 degrees. There's deer everywhere.
Correct.
So there's all the time. These are things that you learn that are, you say, well, Spook said every time a front moves through, it's great the next day. Well,
No,
sometimes it's not. But if that happens in Iowa or Ohio, it's not as big a deer because those deer are used to cold, nasty weather.
Yep.
It affects those deer less than it does deer in the South. And a deer in Canada, 0's like bikini weather to him.
Well, think about the opposite though, and I say this. You tell me your thoughts. So, and let me real quick. The point I think you're making is, look, when the pressure is changing, whether it's the front end or the back end, and you can get in the woods if all the other factors are right. Get in the woods because that's typically a time when deer are going to move, whether it's the front or the back end. So, if you can be in the woods between those two periods of time, You're going to learn. You're going to see animals.
Yep.
On the other side, let's say in Iowa, the one year I got drawn and did a muzzleloader, late season muzzleloader hunt, where, you talk about they get cold weather and they're not as apt to those major changes. Well, I had the opposite happen. Had a heat wave come in, and it stopped snowing. This is December. Stopped snowing, and it was sunny and it was warm for a week, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
So it was like that super cold in Georgia where it's like too cold, the deer don't move. Same thing in Iowa when it got too warm.
Yeah.
It was beautiful out, but the deer were
Well,
non-existent.
there's nothing worse than planning all year to go to Kansas or Ohio or Iowa or wherever your dream hunt is, and you've waited so long for this, and you get there and it's sunny and 85 the whole time you're there.
It was horrible.
And it's horrible. Especially the further north you get, the more that affects.
Yeah.
But I mean, even here, if it's sunny and 85, I won't even go unless that red moon. So now I'm transitioning over into that red moon question. Okay. That October, some people call it harvest moon, red moon, October moon. There's 2 days there that are magical. And it almost doesn't even matter what the weather is.
Okay.
It is just it's a magnet. I mean, if you're on a deer, especially a food source, you got a deer, you've been getting an occasional picture of him in your food plot or whatever your food source is. Or if you're hunting a funnel that's got a couple rubs in it, or you've got a picture of a deer on a trail at some time, wherever it is your spot is you want to hunt, you need to be in the stand those 2 afternoons. Mornings, if you want to try them, but I'm always there again. I'd hate to try to go into it in the morning, and but sometimes the feed pattern on the moon guide might tell you the morning hunt is going to be better. So according to, if I'm hunting that's also determined on how am I hunting the deer. Am I hunting a food plot or am I hunting in the woods? If I'm hunting in the woods around acorns, then I'm going to try to get in there super early and on the red moon and hunt that spot in the morning. Also, if I'm hunting out on the edge on a food plot or some other food source, then I'm not going to hunt it in the morning. I'm going to hunt it on those 2 or 3 good October red moon afternoons in the evening. Of course, the moon's position, and here we are going into a conversation about moon phases, which I know he asked that question also. And I've had a dozen people want me to talk about the moon. I don't know how much we want to get into that right now. But as the moon's position changes, deer move the best. It's been our experience when this moon is straight up and straight down. And like on those afternoons when you're going to the stand, and you just, even if you hadn't looked at the moon guide, if you're just paying attention on a day-to-day basis to the position of the moon, and you look up there in the afternoon, and you're headed to the stand at 3 o'clock or whatever, and the moon's right there, you're like, it's going to be a good afternoon. Because by the time you get,
and I believe that,
by the time you an hour or 30 minutes before dark, that moon's up high, deer should be moving,
Yeah.
And then 24 hours later, it's going to be right below you. So what time of the day is that tomorrow morning? Right. It could be good. I'm more, when I'm hunting food sources, I'm an afternoon guy.
I know you've said that. Yeah.
And then if I'm hunting acorns, which I don't do very much anymore because I don't hunt Tennessee as much as I used to. But if I was back in the day when I hunted Tennessee in the mornings a lot, as far as acorns are concerned, I would try to hunt those mornings when I thought the moon was going to be, because I mean, it's like certain times you get up in the mornings and the moon might be, you might look up at 8 o'clock in the morning and there's the moon. Yeah. Well, at 10 o'clock, it's going to be straight over you. They're going to be moving there. And that's why a lot of people are like, I killed him at straight up and down 12 o'clock. I bet you the moon, if you knew and had looked at the moon guide, I bet you
That's when it was
that's
straight
when it
up,
was
straight
supposed to
down.
be. That's when they were supposed to be moving. And a friend of mine developed the moon guide, which was an actual. You've seen it's the circle,
The dial.
the dial. Jeff Murray. So
Yeah.
I love Jeff to death. He was a great guy. He's the one that did my North American whitetail article on me when I killed the big Kansas buck. And he came to the house. It was awesome. Great guy. And he passed away just a few years after that. He had, I believe he had cancer. And so it was really sad. But Adam Hayes ended up buying the moon guide from Jeff's wife. And
Okay.
and Adam is a well known big buck hunter. Has killed several 200-inch deer, and he usually sends me one every year, and I use that moon guide. It's very detailed. It even tells you, you know, if you should be hunting bedding or feed or staging areas at the different times of the day according to when the deer should be moving. Now we know there's a lot of apps now that you can get on the app, and it'll give you the moon phase and what the prime feeding time should be. I like that app that has a 1 deer to 6 deer a day. So when you look at it, it'll say, 4 deer a day, and prime feeding is between this time period and this time period, and then the next best time is another time period. And so
No, I love those too.
yeah, yeah. So I like the one you see a 5 or 6 deer a day, and the prime feeding is from 4 to 6 in the afternoon. You're like, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a good.
that's the
Well,
one.
here's the thing. Absolutely. The thing that I look about that is the apps, and everybody's got different ones.
Uh-huh.
We use Hunt Stand here a lot, and the reason I like Hunt Stand, and again, there are many good ones, is it gives you the weather. It gives me a wind cone based
Uh-huh.
on my map. It gives me the forecast,
Uh-huh.
so I can have that for the next period of time. What I like about the Moon Guide, though, is that sometimes you do have to plan, or at least gives you from a vacation day, like when the red moon is, when full moon. So if you do have to do a little bit of planning, these apps don't go out that far.
Exactly.
That I think the Moon Guide is awesome
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
you're kind of putting the different pieces of the puzzle
Yeah, I
together.
think it's a great tool. And Jeff, so this is actually when I really got into the moon. I wasn't into the moon as much, even though I had learned some things on my own through the years. But when I spent time, when I think Jeff stayed at the house there 2 or 3 days when we were doing the interview for that article, and he was of course really into it, and because he had put a lot of time and effort and research into his product, the Moon Guide, and he was really proud of it. And so we had a lot of conversation because there again, it was an opportunity for me to learn, you know,
Sure.
not to be envious or jealous or mad because he thought of it and I didn't, or because he killed a big buck the year before with it and I didn't. Hint,
Yeah.
hint. It was a it was a opportunity to learn from
Yep.
somebody who knew some more about something than I did.
Yep. That's very relevant to killing deer.
Exactly. To something that I love. So why wouldn't I
Hmm.
sit there and absorb everything this guy could tell me in two
Sure.
days who had 20 more years of experience than I did at the time, and learn and collaborate on
Sure.
ideas and thoughts and lessons learned. And so that's what
Yep.
we did, and
Love it.
it was awesome. And I learned a lot more about the moon during that time. And I really give Jeff the credit for teaching me and taking me to that level on moon phase,
Hmm.
and especially that
Yep.
October moon. When I figured that October moon thing out, Brian, I've killed, I don't know. I don't
My
even know.
boy's speechless.
I
That
don't even
means
know
it's a
how
lot.
many I've killed on that October moon. I mean, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that 2 day period right there is magic. I mean, it's magic.
Hint, hint for everybody: if you're not hunting the October moon this fall,
Mhm.
you need to be hunting the October moon this
And,
fall.
and, that, and nothing there again,
I
hunting is
mean, the red
hunting.
moon this
Nothing's going
fall.
to work every time. He may have another
Correct,
favorite
but
spot that you don't know about that he hit instead of your spot. But if he's hitting your spot and your trail camera and you're getting him on trail camera, here's another thing. If you're getting a buck on trail camera 4 or 5 nights a week, three to not, some people say, oh, he comes in every night. I bet you he's going to come in daylight on that red moon.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the.
Okay.
That's the thing. I mean, I never thought. I know guys that plan their whole season around those 2 days.
Okay.
I mean, they'll tell you
Yeah.
they'd rather hunt those 2 days than any other time of the year. And we get lulled into this belief that the October lull is not even worth hunting a lot of times, and a lot of times you can mess your spot up by over hunting it during that October. But there again, I believe if the weather's good, if you get a front that moves through, that's a good time to hit it. But that October moon is always a good time to hit it. And then, of course, usually the last 2 or 3 days of October are always good pre-rut, especially if you have a front move through. And for
Yeah.
whatever reason, it seems like Halloween. It's so ironic to me that me being obsessed with big deer like I am, and being born on Halloween, it seems like Halloween is always a magical day. I have people all the
Oh.
time telling me Halloween's the best day of the year to hunt for whatever reason.
Oh, I killed my buck on Halloween, I think 3-4 years ago in South Dakota, and I finally did it, and he was a giant, awesome buck. So
Yeah,
I've been wanting to
Halloween
do it
is
for
to
years.
me kind of kicks off is the beginning of
Oh
the
yeah.
rut. And when I say
Yeah.
the rut, I mean pre-rut. Obviously, most of the time they're
Correct.
not breeding that early. Most of the
Correct.
time but they're. And if there's a little cold front or good
Hmm.
moon phase or anything during that time, always the 30th, 31st, first is going to be good.
Yep. Well, Spook, thank you very much. We covered a lot today. We are gonna, I think, dig more into these questions. I think this is a good way to help dig into some things. And Ty, thank you very much for sending your questions.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. Thanks, Ty.
and please, others, if you've got questions, we're going to do our best to do more and more of this. But
Yeah.
great tips today, Spook, and appreciate it. We'll get this posted. And again, thank you everybody for listening and participating and supporting the 11th Commandment by Spook Nation. And we are again looking forward to more to come.
Yeah, we're really appreciative to obviously the people that listen, and that I love it when people ask questions, because we do want to know what you want to know about, and sometimes, admittingly, I can tend to take things for granted and overlook, and so yeah, we really appreciate everybody's input and questions, and go Vols.
Absolutely. Go, go Gators. All right.
But yeah,
All
I
right,
know I'm so nervous about tonight.
buddy. Look, everybody, we're gonna see how this goes in the next couple podcasts, and we'll get a little update from everybody. But
Yeah.
I know you're gonna be on
Hopefully
pins
by
and
the
needles
time
the
this
next.
airs, I'm in a not, but I'm nervous about it. Of all people, I didn't want to have to play this early. Is Auburn, Alabama, Florida, and Kentucky. We're
Yep.
having to play
And you've got
Kentucky,
one.
so
Well, we will see tonight,
yeah.
my friend.
See you, buddy.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate you.
Take care. Thank you, Spook.